This is the Education Council Consortium's third workshop on school governance this year. This is our final workshop, although we are planning some panel discussions, which you will hear more about soon. The first thing I want to do is allow the interpreters to introduce themselves and their services.
Hi, good evening. My name is Maria Sigourney, and I'm going to be the interpreter tonight along with Megan Morrissey, and we're going to be offering interpretation services from English to Spanish and Spanish to English. So if you are not fully bilingual, including presenters, please use the interpretation tool. So if someone speaks in Spanish and asks a question, you can understand what they're saying. If you're in a computer, please find an icon that looks like a globe where it says interpretation and then choose English. If you are on a cell phone or in other devices, you're not going to be able to see the globe. So find in your toolbar the last option on your right where it says more. Press those three little dots and then you will see a menu. Find the option language interpretation and then choose English and press done. If you're not presenting today or speaking, please make sure you're muted at all times. And also, if you have any issues with interpretation, please let us know in the chat box. I'm going to be repeating these exact same instructions in Spanish. Buenas tardes, buenas noches, mi nombre es María Sigourney y voy a estar acá con Megan Morrissey. Vamos a ser las intérpretes para el día de hoy. Vamos a tener interpretación simultánea al español, así es que si gusta escuchar esta reunión en español, puede accesar a la herramienta de interpretación y si está en una computadora, busque un globo, un icono que se ve como un globo en la parte de abajo de sus pantallas, donde dice interpretation y luego presione donde dice español. Si está en un teléfono celular, no va a poder ver el globo, entonces busque en su barra de herramientas en la última opción a mano derecha donde dice More, puede presionar esos tres puntos y abrir un menú. Y luego busque la opción que se llama Language Interpretation o interpretación de idiomas y luego escoja donde dice español y luego presione donde dice Done o finalizado para que se guarden sus preferencias. Si tiene algún problema con la interpretación, déjenos saber y también nos gustaría saber si nos están escuchando. Déjenos saber en el cuadro de comentarios si van a estar escuchándonos en español. La última cosa es si tiene problema con la interpretación, déjenos saber también a través del cuadro de comentarios. Y eso sería todo. Muchas gracias. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maria. We'd like to thank the Alliance for Quality Education for providing the interpretation services tonight and for their partnership in general. Shino, can you go to the next slide? Okay, first, some commonly asked questions about mayoral control. When we talk about mayoral control and school governance in New York City, the first question on many people's minds is what is going to replace it? What are the solutions? And we, as the ECC, have an agenda for this year for the state legislature that both gets at some of the solutions and really hopefully includes lots of other people in further developing those solutions on how our education system should work. So here are our short-term asks for the legislative session. Reduce the number of mayoral appointees on the PEP to 9 so that the mayor no longer has a majority on the panel for educational policy. Empower CECs to hire superintendents. Empower student members on the PEP and CCECs to vote. Give CECs power over school closures, co-locations, and phase-outs. And reform the CCEC elections to make sure that our elected representatives really represent the communities who are voting for them. Now, our longer-term ask, but perhaps the really important one, we think, is to establish a process to develop an alternative system. because we recognize that these changes, even the changes that we're asking for, which we think will really make a difference, are not enough to really have a democratic system of governance in this city. So we are asking the state to impanel a commission that would include parents, teachers, students, administrators, paraprofessionals, everyone who has rights in this system to collaborate together to develop an alternative system. Next slide, please. So here's the timeline that we have proposed for that developing that next alternative system. So the law would be amended this spring. A commission would be established this fall, and the commission would spend a year developing a new plan, meeting with rights holders, and that would be proposed to the state, who would take action to create a new structure for school governance in New York City. And that new system would be implemented over the course of 5 years until 2030. This 5-year implementation would would prevent there from being a shock to the system, everything changing all at once. If there are elections that take place, they wouldn't have to take place all at once. I should mention that Chicago, which is currently in a transition away from mayoral control, is doing that over in a phased manner as we're proposing. Next slide, please. So the important, very short-term action that we're asking of you, because none of this can happen easily without it, is to call the governor and tell her to take mayoral control out of the budget. If mayoral control is in the budget as she has proposed, it will be very difficult to negotiate the kinds of changes that we want and to ask for the process that we want. So please call the governor and ask her. We know that the legislature is not in favor of keeping the mayoral control in the budget, although you can call your assembly member and state senator as well to just tell them to hold strong on that point. Next slide. Okay, here's what we're going to do in this workshop. We're going to talk about the composition and eligibility of school boards in New York State and across the country. We are going to talk about a little bit about the structure of the school boards in New York City. We have a central board of education, which is called the PEP, which we call the PEP. And then we have community education councils, which are not really school boards, but are similar in some ways. And we are going to talk about how school boards are selected, both how they're selected now in New York City and how they might be selected in the future, how they're selected elsewhere, and how that has an effect on the system. Okay, just for some context here, we have a chart that shows a comparison of school boards across New York and across the country. We can see here, the first thing that you'll notice is just how much bigger the New York City school system is than any other system in New York State. However, especially in terms of the number of schools, it isn't that much bigger than the LA Unified School District. We do have a much bigger student enrollment, and you see here, Chicago has many fewer schools and about and a much smaller enrollment as well. Okay, who should serve on school boards?
So I'm going to quickly
yeah.
take a very quick tour of who is serving on school boards around the country and around the rest of the state. So the composition in New York State, cities in New York State that have 125,000 or more residents, these are particular categories in the state education law. These cities are pulled out as a separate section in the state law, and then New York City is its own separate category in the state law, which is why we looked at these. So Buffalo has a 9-member board. All of them are elected with 1 non-voting student member. But Buffalo also has 6 sub-districts within the Buffalo School District. And it's the sub-districts that elect their representative on the board. But then there are 3 members at large. So there is some type of geographic representation on the Buffalo School Board. Rochester has 7 elected members on the board with 1 non-voting student member, and it doesn't have any sub-districts. So anybody who is within that Rochester school districts can vote for any candidates, regardless of where you live within the Rochester school district and where that candidate is running from. Syracuse is similar, 7 elected board members, and I could not find whether they have a non-voting student member or not. In the state law, student members are not mentioned. So I have to call somebody in Syracuse to find out if they have a student member or not. Yonkers is also similar in terms of the size, but Yonkers School Board has 9 members who are appointed by the mayor. So it is a form of mayoral control, but we don't hear a lot of complaints from, well, I haven't heard a lot of complaints from parents in Yonkers, but again, it is a appointed board, and the appointing authority is the mayor of the city of Yonkers. So the law for this section of cities 125,000 residents or larger does not require a student member, which means the Buffalo and Rochester decided to add student members, and they're non-voting, but they're not required to do so. Law does not specify representation for any student groups, such as students with disabilities, English language learners. And this is something that we actually have in our system, right? So I thought it was interesting that this particular section of the law governing these cities do not include that representation for student subgroups. Eligibility for these cities. You have to be a citizen of the United States to run for school boards in these cities. That means you have to be you have to be qualified to register or vote at an election according to the election law. You have to be 18 years of age or older, and there's a residency requirement to run for the school board. It's either 30 days, or I think some cities have a 90-day requirement, but you have to be a resident for a particular period of time prior to your running for the school board. Oh, I have that there. Sorry. Yonkers actually is 3 years. Rochester's 30 days. And Syracuse is 90 days. So these are sort of all over the place in terms of how long you have to live in the district to run for the school board. Buffalo is also 3 years, and in the sub-district if you're running for the sub-district position. And these are all governed by the election law, how these elections happen and the eligibilities and whatnot. There's a reference to the election laws under the education law for this section. So then we looked at some of the other larger districts outside of New York State. So clearly, LA Unified is the next large one. They have a 7-member elected board with 1 non-voting student member. And again, they have 7 sub-districts within that LA Unified School District, but there are no members at large. So each sub-district elects its own representatives. 1 representative, sorry. Miami-Dade is another large school district. They have a 9-member elected board with 1 non-voting student member. Again, Miami-Dade also has sub-districts, and each sub-district elects its own representative and no members at large. Clark County, Nevada is something that's interesting that I came across. They have a 7-member elected board with 4 appointed members. And the 4 appointees are actually non-voting members, and this is something new that they're rolling out effective this year. and I can't remember who's appointing these members. I have to go back to their website. In the slide deck that we're going to be sharing with you tomorrow, there is a link to these school districts if you are curious about how these systems are set up. So this Clark County, Nevada is sort of a hybrid of 7 elected members with 4 appointed members, although the appointed members are non-voting. And these boards do not appear to have any representational requirements for student subcategories beside the geographic representation in LA and Miami-Dade. Wanted to look at eligibility for other large districts, which is very similar to those large cities in New York State. You still have to be a citizen of the United States. You have to be 18 years or older. You need to be registered voters to run for the school board. You need to be a resident of the school district or the sub-district for the school board you're running for. And some of them require signature petitions, much like the other elected officials in New York State, like city council and assembly members. You have to go out there and get petitions and get a minimum number of signatures on your petition to be eligible to run. And they are all governed by election laws. Clark County non-voting member appointees, there is no citizenship requirement for that particular set of appointees. But the website doesn't explicitly require U.S. citizenship. So I'm interpreting it to be that non-citizens can serve as appointed members. But again, they're non-voting members. Hello. Why is it stuck? Okay, sorry.
Oh.
Okay, so that was that. Okay. Chicago is in transition. I'm going to hand it over to Jonathan, who's been doing this work.
So Chicago, as I mentioned before, is currently in a transition away from mayoral control to an elected school board. And one of the things that is happening right now that is one of the reasons why they're in a 5-year transition period is that they need to draw districts for each representative on the school board. They have never had these districts. And so there's a political process of drawing districts across the city so that they are fair and that there is representation from all major constituencies. As you know, when districts are drawn for other elected officials, this is a political and often drawn out process. So prior to 2024, all of the appointees were appointed by the mayor in Chicago. There was no qualification for eligibility in the law. By this December, there will be 10 elected positions on the board. And by November 2026, there will be all 21 elected members will be elected. This is a large school board. Most school boards across the country are much smaller than this, but this was the solution that was worked out for Chicago in the Illinois legislature. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the school boards, the structure of the school boards in New York City. The New York City Board of Education, the PEP, 23 appointed members, 5 appointed by the borough presidents, 5 elected by CEC presidents, 13 appointed by the mayor, and there are 2 non-voting members, the chancellor and a representative from the comptroller. Also 2 non-voting student members, which is not required by law. The eligibility for these positions, the appointees for the borough president need to reside in the borough and have to have a child attending a public school in New York City. The mayoral appointees, there must be 4 of them must be parents one a student with with disabilities, one a parent of a student who is an English language learner, and one of a District 75 parent. Otherwise, they are no requirements for those appointees. And the those elected by CEC presidents must be a resident of the borough and have a child attending public school. Next slide. There are also other requirements to avoid conflicts of interest. The PEP members cannot be a member, officer, or employee of a public corporation, authority, or commission in which the mayor has majority appointments. There's no minimum age requirement and no US citizenship requirement. And they do not have to be a registered voter, as is the case with many school boards. And the composition of community education councils, there are 10 elected members. One needs to have a student with disabilities in that district. One needs to have a child who is an English language learner in the district. One parent of a student in District 75 whose school is located within the district lines, and 2 appointees of the borough president. Also 2 non-voting student members. This was recently changed in state law. It was one member for a long time. Okay, and the elected members of CECs have to have a child in pre-K through 8 school in that district, or have had one within the preceding 2 years. The borough president appointees do not have to have a child. They either need to be a resident or operate a business. I think that's in the district, actually, not just in the borough. But
yes, that's correct. Sorry about that.
And the student members, they are high school members living in the district, serving as elected student leaders appointed by the superintendent. Okay. Shino, I think you're...
Okay. This is mine.
Yep.
Yes, other things to consider. Okay. Length of term. So Chicago's term for the Board of Education members in Chicago is 4 years, and they have staggered terms. And a lot of the boards in New York State actually have term of between 3 and 5 years. New York City actually changed the term during the last amendments to the law. So now PEP members serve a 1-year term, super short, and terms for community and citywide education council members is 2 years. Staggered terms is something that some of the boards do, like Chicago has a staggered term, and I think most of the other New York State school boards have staggered terms as well. This prevents complete turnover, right? Every election, there are only half the board that can potentially be turning over. Some board members are elected again. I didn't look at term limits, but I think some of them do not have term limits. So if you're reelected, you can serve many terms. But at any given election, you don't have the whole board turning over, which is something that we've seen in our CEC elections. Some of the CECs have completely turned over with all new members or just one returning member. So something we should have to think about. So New York City does not have staggered terms either for PEP or for CECs and citywide councils. Compensation is another point that we should consider, and thank you for putting that in the chat. LA board members get paid some hefty amount, $125,000, I think. That's like a real salary, but this job is super important. So one can argue yeah, it's worth that kind of a salary to be making important decisions that can really impact a person's whole life. And I think Buffalo used to have school boards with compensation. I don't know if they're still getting paid. It's not unusual for school board members to get compensated. New York City offers no stipend, right, no stipend or compensation, correct. So PEP members or CEC and citywide council members are not compensated at all. No stipends, no salary, nothing. Members are reimbursed for expenses. So you're actually not spending your own money to serve on these bodies, but there's no compensation. So who selects members? And it's back to you, Jonathan.
So currently, parents of children in New York City public schools vote for community and citywide education councils. All parents or guardians of students in the system can vote. There's no citizenship requirement, no minimum age. There's no voter registration required, although parents do, with some exceptions, need to have an account on the New York City schools account, and voting has taken place electronically through that system.
Jonathan, I'm sorry I messed up. I wasn't ready to hand it over to you.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that. This is outside of New York City.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So this is why there's the qualified voter, citizens of the United States in here. Sorry about that. Yeah. So just quickly, outside of New York City, people who can elect members to the school boards are qualified voters, which means you have to be a citizen of the United States, at least 18 years of age, resident of the school district for 30 days to be able to vote for the school board elections, and voting in general or municipal elections. Some school districts in New York State do that. They have their school board election during the general election in November, or in school board elections that are held in May. So New York State has more than 700 school districts and school boards, and some of them hold their elections in May, some of them hold their elections in November. But for all of them outside of New York City, you need to be a qualified voter, meaning citizen of the United States, 18 years or older, and resident of the school board or school district for at least 30 days to be able to vote for your school board elections. Okay, now we go to the New York City. Sorry about that.
And you'll see why this is what Chino just explained is important here. So I've been over this slide, but I'll just reiterate that in our CEC and citywide education council elections, all parents can vote regardless of voter registration or citizenship requirements. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So until 2019, this is not how elections worked. Until 2019, there was a system by which in each school, the president, treasurer, and secretary of the PA or PTA were the ones who voted for the CEC members. There was still no citizenship requirement, no minimum age, and the voter registration was not required. This was all administered by the DOE. Okay, before mayoral control, New York City had community district school boards. So each of our 32 community school districts had an elected school board, and the voters who voted in those elections were both registered voters on the one hand in that district and parents of the schools in that district. there were two separate registration processes at the time. So those school boards actually were more inclusive in terms of who could vote for them than any of the school board, the current school boards in New York State. And indeed, the elections were done by ranked choice voting. Okay, next slide. So there has been a voting debate about whether non-citizens can vote in certain types of elections, and there have been court cases that have ruled on these matters. So there is a bill, currently a bill introduced in Illinois to allow non-citizen Chicagoans to vote in school board elections. The courts granted non-citizen San Francisco's the right to vote in school elections. I think I would certainly hope that if we were to have elected school board elections, that we would find a way to have non-citizens vote in those elections. Certainly parents, non-citizen parents vote in those elections. So there are bills introduced in the state to establish state citizenship as well. Okay, next slide. Okay.
Breakout rooms.
Yes.
Okay. We have 32 people. Let's do, oh, I don't know, like 6 breakout rooms. All right. So while I'm putting that together, Jonathan, maybe you can go on and
Yes.
yeah.
So what we would like the you to do in these breakout rooms is to imagine what you think school boards in New York City should be. Who, let's move to the next slide here. Who should be eligible to serve on these bodies? Who should select or elect the members of the boards? How big, oops, there's a typo there, but how big should the policy, should these bodies be? You know, I will say that prior to mayoral control, there was a 7-member central board, school board in New York City. We now have 23 members on the PEP. Chicago's board is going to have 21 members. So there's real variation here. And next slide has another prompt here. And what power should those boards have? That's one thing we did not discuss in this particular workshop, but there are real differences from municipality to municipality in what boards have power over. And when New York City transitioned to mayoral control from the previous system, the powers of the Central Board of Education changed. What they did, what they decided on, changed in that transition. And be creative. Think outside the box. We want you to really imagine a better system for our city. You know, when you're thinking about how large school boards should be, think in terms of well, I would say think in terms of both representation and in numbers. You know, we need well-functioning boards that can discuss things. We also need to make sure that there's real representation on those boards. Focus on how we empower parents, students, teachers, and particularly those that have been disenfranchised and marginalized from our system. And you know, you don't need to think about legal constraints for this exercise. We want you to think outside the box and imagine what you think would be best. Some actions you can take. We mentioned already that we need to call the governor and tell her to take mayoral control out of the budget. We do not want a 4-year extension. We do not want an extension of mayoral control in its current form at all. We need these changes made in the system. Here we have the number and a link, although you can't. Shino, can you put that link in the chat?
Yes, I can. And also, we'll be sending a campaign out shortly, so don't worry about copying everything, but I will definitely put this in the chat as well.
And the next slide. We also, with a coalition that includes more UFT, AQE, District 28 Action for Equity, and others, we have been working on this issue, and we created this one-pager back in front of information for people about what is mayoral control and what we're fighting for. So we will send that out as well. And please pass that along to everyone. These are some groups that we are aligned with or we're working with, and connect with us or with any of these groups to continue this fight. Whatever happens this spring in Albany, there's going to be a lot of work to do. Even if we get a commission from the state, we as parents and as teachers and as community members will need to make ourselves part of the process to determine the next, a better school system.
Emma, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to know if Jonathan can share the slide that you guys presented as well as the flyer.
Emma, honey, you know I share everything right after the workshop.
Okay. I think stuff is going to my other email. I had such a hard time signing on, but yeah, I'll look for it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, we always send it out after the workshop. So you'll have the links to the slide deck as well as the fact sheets and whatever else that we think you should have. So you'll have all of that. And at one point, because this is being recorded, we'll probably put it up on YouTube. We have to do a little editing before we do that, but that'll be up on YouTube and the link will be sent to you as well.
And last but not least, I tried to write stuff down from all 6 groups. I think we can take some of the stuff from everybody and just get to running. I was just in Albany on Tuesday. We need to do this.
Okay, so we have to put a little plug in here. We do have an evaluation form for all our workshops and coffee talks and cocktail hours and all those things that we host. So I'm going to put the link in the chat, but you can also take a QR code for the evaluation. If you can take 2 minutes to give us your feedback on this session, we would be very, very grateful because we do actually look at those evaluation and try to do better for future sessions. And finally, because we are a grassroots, teeny tiny nonprofit, we're always looking for donations. Any amount is appreciated, $5, whatever. If you got $5 grand, we'll take it too. But if you can donate, that would be great. With that, 5 minutes to spare. Karina?
Question about the survey. It's asking, the first question is about what session we attend.
Mhm.
If we attend more than one session, what we do?
I would like you to fill out separate forms for each session you want to give us a feedback for.
Okay, so today I will put this 3rd session.
Yes, please.
Yeah,
Thank you. All right, everybody, thank you so much. Oh, before you go, I just have to say this breakout report was fantastic. I love all the ideas that are so creative and out of the box thinking, and it really reaffirmed my belief, at least, that having a commission or some kind of a process where we bring all of you together to come up with an alternative is the right approach. So I really want to thank you for your creative thinking and sharing your ideas with us. It was just really, really phenomenal to hear you share your ideas And I'm just really excited that we have so much knowledge and creativity and experience and expertise in this group of people in this room, but beyond. So thank you so much. And I see Tamara, your hand is up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to add from the group that I was in with Shirley, Lauren, and the other, and Megan, I believe. We if we do like when we were explaining about the Merrill and the other parents, if we do the PEP, they should get a stipend because y'all do a lot of work and it shouldn't be for free. And because too many times we use too many of us and our parent leaders for free stuff and they give us too much headaches and the shit is stressful and I'm tired of the fuckery. Sorry, my French for people, but like we need to get paid for this mess. It's like it's enough. They getting all the money and they're taking away all the money from our children. So they need to give some of it to us.
Thank you, Tamara.
And before we go, I want to say publicly thank you, Shino, for your years of advocacy and oversight. We need to kill this.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Emma. And thank you, Jonathan, for being a co-pilot. With that, have a wonderful, wonderful evening and weekend, and we'll be sending you information about the forum. So keep your eyes peeled.
Thank
Good
you so
night.
much. Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.